Good evening. This is Political Forum, and I'm your host, Dartesia Pitts. This is Wednesday, March 18, 2015. Today on Political Forum, we have a special guest. Our guest is Jim Allen. Jim is coming from the Chicago Board of Elections. Hi, Jim. How are you?
All right, Dartesia.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Okay. Today, we're urging everyone to get out to vote. Of course, as we know, voting for Chicago elections for the runoff is April 7th. So Jim is going to give us all the information necessary so we can become educated voters as to the process. If you are watching us now, we encourage you to use the number at the bottom of the screen, 312-738-1060, and join in on the dialogue about Chicago and voting. All right, Jim. We're going to start. We, of course, have an election coming up, April 7th. And some people might not have voted in the last election a couple of weeks ago. How can they register to vote to be prepared to vote in the April 7th election?
If you're registered to vote already in the city of Chicago, check your registration status at chicagoelections.com, our website, or feel free to give us a call, 312-269-7900. And at our website, or if you give us a call, we can check your registration status. If you're already registered to vote and you voted in February or you voted in November, or even if you didn't vote but you're already registered at your current address, you're set. You're ready to go.
Okay.
Now, if you need to update your registration or you need to register for the first time in the city of Chicago, you still have an opportunity, but you need to act between now and April 4. And that's called the grace period. And that requires you to come in person, either to the election board between now and Sunday, or starting next Monday, all 51 of our early voting sites. You'll need to bring 2 forms of ID, at least one of which must show your current address. So that could include a utility bill, a bank statement, a driver's license, a state ID, a passport, but at least one of these things it needs to show your current address. And then you need to be ready to vote during that same visit. Okay. So you have until April 4. There won't be same-day registration on Election Day. I want to emphasize that. You have to speak now by April 4th or forever hold your peace. That's it. So you have an opportunity in person at 51 locations starting at early voting next week, all the way through April 4th. And then early voting, of course, opens up next week, and that's for everybody who's registered to vote. Lastly, we have absentee voting.
Okay. Before we get to absentee voting, I'm a 17-year-old, right? And I turn 18 on April the 3rd. Am I able to vote?
Yes.
Okay.
If you are going to be 18 on or before April 7, Election Day, you may register now and cast your ballot.
So that's good to know. So if you have anybody in your family that will be 18 at that time, encourage them to go out and register to vote.
Absolutely.
You were talking about grace period voting earlier, and prior to us coming on air, we had an opportunity to have a conversation, and you were telling us about a very inspirational story about a young lady who came in to register to vote today. You want to share that with the audience?
Yeah, Dartesia, young lady, that's great. A woman who became a U.S. citizen today. She was originally from Spain, and she went through the swearing-in ceremony at the Dirksen, and then she came immediately with her family and came immediately over to the election board to use grace period registration. And I should mention, young lady, she also turned 102 today. This was her 102nd birthday.
What a birthday.
So I mention this to all of our younger voters who seem to find that they weren't able to use online registration by March 10, or they find it inconvenient to come and register. This woman, she became a U.S. citizen today. She's 102. She came in, and her family asked her, "Why do you want to get it done today?" And she says, "We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow." You know, and you don't.
Right.
So you have no excuse if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, and you haven't registered. If you haven't noticed, we have a big election. We have a big election. We had the first runoff election in this format citywide for mayor. We also have 18
This is our
wards.
first in the history of Chicago, or?
Well, we started with the runoff format in 1999.
Okay.
And in every election since then, a candidate has won outright.
Okay.
And in February, so there wasn't a need for a runoff. This is the first election since this format came into being where no one won it with 50% plus one. So now we have a citywide runoff for the first time.
Well, Chicago, this is precedential, so that makes it even more important for you to get out there and register to vote. We have a caller. Hi, caller.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, I have a question about participating. Like, what if I wanted to serve as a judge or a voter registrar or a poll watcher? Is it too late for me to sign up now, or what are the details with that?
Well, if you're seeking to be a judge, we're very fortunate to be fully staffed from February. We're confident that all of our judges and our polling place administrators are going to be able to return for April. So we're going to have enough staff there. If you want to be a poll watcher with one of the campaigns, you'll need to contact one of the campaigns that you want to represent, or you can contact one of the few organizations that had applied by the deadline to be civic groups to be poll watchers, and that includes the League of Women Voters, the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Operation Push. So you can contact one of those and be a poll watcher, or you can contact a campaign for a candidate whose name is on the ballot. The ballots this time will have the two candidates for mayor in every precinct in Chicago. And then in the wards where there are aldermanic runoffs, we have 18 wards with runoffs. There will also be the two candidates for alderman in that ward. So check your sample ballot. If you want to represent one of the candidates on the ballot where you live or somewhere else in another neighborhood, you're free to do so. But you have to be credentialed by one of those organizations, and you have to surrender that credential form to the judges of election in that polling place.
Okay, good question. Thank you, caller. We were just talking about eligibility to vote and grace period voting. And I know we did, I'm going to let the audience see this overhead. These are the items that allow you to be eligible to vote. Of course, U.S. citizen, at least 18 years old, a precinct resident for 30 days, and registered. What exactly is that third prong, a precinct resident for 30 days?
Well, you need to be a resident of the precinct where you're voting at least 30 days before Election Day. So that means by March 8th, you needed to have been a resident of the precinct where you plan to vote in the April 7 election, whether you're using early voting, absentee voting, or grace period registration and voting.
Okay.
So if you moved just very recently, like yesterday or over the weekend, you still need to vote where you were a resident 30 days before Election Day.
Okay. What's the difference between a precinct and a ward?
A precinct is the smallest area, the smallest geographic division, political subdivision. A ward represents 1/50th of the city, roughly, based on the number of residents, not the number of voters, because different wards have higher numbers of children who are not eligible to vote, or they have people who are not yet citizens who are not eligible to vote. So some wards have more voters, some have less, but they all have approximately 53,000 residents.
Okay.
So a ward takes up a 1/50th of the city, roughly, and a precinct, there are anywhere from 20 to 40 to 50 precincts in every ward, and that's like your little subsection of your neighborhood. And on Election Day, if you wait to vote on Election Day, which most of our voters do, you have to go to the precinct assigned, the polling place assigned to your local precinct. If you don't know where that is, check our website, chicagoelections.com.
All right. So we can check the website. If I just moved, should I bring an ID? If I'm voting in a new area, is an ID required to vote?
An ID is required in 3 or 4 instances. It's always required. You need a government-issued photo ID, which can include a Chicago Public Schools student ID, for example. It can include a driver's license, a state ID, a passport. You need a government photo ID to use early voting.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily have to be in Illinois, but if it's for example a Pennsylvania driver's license, but you're definitely registered here, and that's the most recent government-issued photo ID, we can accept that. Another time you need ID is if there's a question on Election Day in your polling place and your signature doesn't match the one on record, because as we get older, our signatures change. We all become doctors, like writing prescription pads.
Right.
And so if there's a question about your signature, you might have to show some form of ID. There, the standard expands to include a utility bill, a bank statement, a pay stub, as well as a driver's license or a state ID. But you need to confirm that you are who you say you are and that you live where you say you live.
Okay.
Lastly, you need, if you're registering now in grace period, you need 2 forms of ID, at least one of which has your current address.
Okay. If you're just now tuning in, we're talking to Jim Allen of the Chicago Board of Elections. Please engage us, call us, get on the line, and let's talk about voting in Chicago. 312-738-1060. We have a caller.
Hey, Jim, how you doing? Can you advise me how can a person be much more proactive in terms of always having different types of problems at the polling place? Because I am a person with a disability. I have a visual disability. I appreciate your type of advice you may want to give out to people like me.
It's a great question. One of the things you can do is you can send us an email, and we have a section of our website that's devoted to accessibility issues. You can send us an email at cboe@chicagoelections.net. Notice everything else is .com, but for some reason our email is .net. So CBOE, Chicago Board of Election Commissioners, CBOE@chicagoelections.net. Give us a heads up. We can make sure that we send out notice to the judges of election in your polling place to make absolutely certain. We can get an investigator out there perhaps to make sure there's a touch screen available, so that if you have a different visual capacity, we can make sure that we have something that can either expand the font size, or that you can access an audio ballot, and so that you can mark your ballot privately and independently without any kind of assistance. So that's one option for you. If you have a problem on election day of any kind in your polling place, we want you to call us at Election Central. It's a slightly different number. It's 312-269-7870. I'll repeat that in a sec. But at Election Central, we have attorneys, technicians, investigators, everything under the sun, language assistance. So again, that's 269-7870, and that's for election day. If you need assistance, if you run into any kind of issue at your polling place, whether it's equipment or a voter registration question or what have you.
Okay. Thank you. Good question, caller. We have another caller. Hi, caller.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Good.
I have a quick question. Can you vote if you're awaiting trial or you're on trial for a felony but you're out on bail?
Yes. Under Illinois law and under every state law in the United States, if you're charged but not yet found guilty, if you're awaiting trial, you're eligible to vote, because we're all innocent until proven guilty in the eyes of the law. So some states, after someone is a felon, they take away their right to vote forever, regardless of the nature of the felony. Illinois is among the several states that once you've served your time, if you're convicted of a felony, your voting rights are restored. But it's a very good question. Just like we provide ballot applications to our military and our overseas voters, we also supply ballot applications to the jail for pretrial detainees in case they want to vote. So we try to cover every possible person around the globe who's from Chicago and who might not necessarily be in a traditional voting in your precinct on election day type situation.
All right. You heard that, Chicago. Get out there and vote. No excuses. So if I want to vote early, what do I need to do to vote early?
Make sure that you have a government photo ID.
Okay.
Check our website at chicagoelections.com. You can use any one of the 51 sites. A lot of people think they can only use the site in their ward or the one at the election board, but you can use any of the sites. Whatever site is convenient for you. So if you live on the south side and you're working on the north side and you want to use a north side site near your office or a shop that you work at, you can use that site.
Okay.
If you're running errands on the weekend and you're in a different part of town, you can use an early voting site.
Okay.
So we encourage people to feel free to use any one of the early voting sites. It's not like Election Day where you can only vote in your precinct.
All right, and it starts Monday, March 23rd.
Monday, March 23rd, every day at every site. So all the sites are going to be open 9 to 5 Monday through Saturday, and on Sunday, March 29th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m.
All right. We have another caller.
Yes, good afternoon.
Hi, caller.
Hi, my question is, what can I do if I go to vote but they don't have my name? And my other question is, can I vote in Spanish? Is there any help or any assistance for Spanish-speaking people?
Great question. Check your voter status right now on our website, chicagoelections.com, or give us a call or send us an email. And make sure that you go to the correct precinct. One of the things that we do now is we have an electronic poll book.
Okay.
And this is a powerful, powerful device for our voters and our judges of election in the polling places. So that if someone shows up in one of the wrong precincts, they don't just access a book with the 600 voters in that precinct and then give no direction to anybody else who arrives from anywhere else in town. They now have an electronic poll book where they can access any one of the 1.6 million active and inactive records. Okay. So if a person's in the wrong place, they can print out a little ticket and say, you vote at such and such church or such and such school. This is where you go. Here's the address. And then they can get the voter to the right place where their ballot's going to count. But you also asked the question whether or not we have language assistance. Yes, we have English-Spanish ballots in all of our precincts. We have English-Chinese ballots in targeted areas, English-Hindi ballots in targeted areas. But even if you don't have the paper ballots, we have the touch screen in every precinct, and that offers in all 2,069 precincts all of those languages. So the one more reason to make sure the judges set up the touch screen on Election Day is not only does it take care of people with different physical abilities, but it also helps people with different language needs.
Okay. When you log your vote for a touch screen, do you get a receipt for that, or because I've never used a touchscreen, so how does that work?
A touchscreen creates a paper record, and the paper record stays in the machine.
Okay.
And if you think about what could go wrong if people got a ticket that said this is how you voted, that would unfortunately open the door to people being able to sell or buy votes.
Okay.
So, or to coerce somebody to say, I want to see your ticket when you come out because I'm your boss, or I'm your parent, or something like that. So your secret ballot, but there's the paper record that stays with the touch screen. That's the ultimate record. We've been through recounts with as many as 300,000 ballots. Those things have come out 100% accurate every time.
Good deal. We have another caller. Thank you, Chicago, for calling in.
Yes, hi. Thanks for taking my call. One of the things that was on my mind as you were talking was you mentioned your website and you mentioned email and your telephone number, but a lot of people that are older or don't have a lot of money don't have access to a computer. So I wonder if you would emphasize a little bit more the phone number that people can call. Most people do have a landline or, in some cases, a cell phone. So thank you for thinking about that.
You're welcome. We'll emphasize that again. Between now and the day before Election Day, you want to call us at 312-269-7900. 269-7900 is an excellent question. And then on Election Day, our Election Central is going to be 7870. 312-269-7870. Thank you, caller.
Okay. And what time does the poll open?
On Election Day, the polls open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. We want to emphasize, we're going to see a lot of use of early voting and absentee voting because this April 7 election is going to fall right in the middle of Chicago Public Schools spring break. So if for some reason there's some kind of issue at your polling place and there might be a sleepy-eyed person who's in charge of the key, or the judges are still setting it up, please be patient with us. And hopefully, if not everything, every one of our precincts, 2,069 precincts, is open at 6. Hopefully, they'll be open by 6:05. We aim to get all of them open, but we have more precincts in Chicago than we do in the state of Iowa. So we have a lot. We have a lot of places to open up. We're going to do our best to make sure all of them open on time. We know there's a lot of excitement about this election, and we're counting on a lot better turnout than we even saw in February.
Turnout. We're going to talk about that in a minute,
Okay.
but we have another caller.
All right.
Hi, caller.
Hi. I want to know what is the likelihood that we'll be able to vote online one day in the future?
Oh, excellent question. Right now, for our military overseas voters, we will deliver the ballot to them online. But when it comes to sending your voted ballot back online to an election agency, no one has really conquered all the security issues involved. You look at all of the major banking institutions and major retailers who've been hacked. No one wants to see an election hacked. No one wants to see, even because at some point your ballot is going through somebody else's servers. And even if they can't change your vote, they're going to be able to see your vote and know how you voted. And, you know, since the mid-1800s, we've prided ourselves on a nation that values the secret ballot, where there's no pressure on you to vote a certain way. No, you know, and originally we used to have to go to a big public hall, and they'd call on you, and they'd say, "Dartesia, how do you want to vote? Do you want to vote for Smith or Jones?" And you'd have to say it publicly, which could lead to, you know, someone
All type of
twisting your
controversy.
arm or bribing you or whatever.
Right.
None of that stuff was good. So we went with what's called the Australian ballot. But I don't see any time in the near future. We can deliver the ballot, the unmarked ballot, to the voters online. I see that coming more and more. But as far as you delivering it back to us, there are a lot of security issues there.
Okay. We briefly talked about voter turnout.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we were talking earlier, prior to coming on the show, about the voter turnout for Chicago. Can you give them a little background as to how Chicago voter turnout is comparable to other municipalities across the nation?
Chicagoans should be very proud of their turnouts, especially even for municipal elections. We beat up on ourselves. We had a 34% turnout, which was... it wasn't our lowest, but it was among our lowest. Mm-hmm. But we've had big turnouts for municipal elections, and even 34% is higher than you're going to see in LA, New York, Houston, Miami, any other big city, any other medium-sized city in the rest of the Midwest. Everybody else would dream of having our turnouts. Our best municipal turnout was with when Harold Washington was running. We had 80% of it. That's better than a presidential election.
Wow.
So Chicago has nothing to be ashamed of. Even with 34%, all these other cities that I mentioned, including Indianapolis, Milwaukee, so forth, they're in the mid 20s and upper 20s and upper teens and stuff. So we're doing all right. We're doing all right.
And I thought that was very relevant because I've seen a lot of social media conversations as well as newspaper articles, and you know, there's always a concern about low voter turnout.
Well,
but in comparison, I guess, you know, we should be proud of ourselves, but we still can do better, Chicago.
We can do better. We can do better. And I'll bet you anything right now we're going to do a lot better in April than we did in February.
Well, I'm excited to see what's going to happen. Starting voting, we're going to start voting March 23rd until April 4th. We're early voting, and our voting day, the day, election day, is April 7th. All right. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Dartesia.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to CAN TV Political Forum. I'm your host, Dartesia Pitts. Please tune in next week. Let's see who we're going to have next week. Oh, don't know who we're going to have next week. But you know what? Oh, I'm sorry. 12-4 Alderman Cardenas. We're going to have Alderman Cardenas. And I want to thank Sylvia, who's on the phone tonight. Have a good night.